Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Choosing the Right GP Reporting Tool. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us. There are a couple of housekeeping items we'd like to mention before we begin. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please either raise your hand and we'll unmute your line, or you can submit them through the GoToWebinar question box. We will be saving questions until the end of today's presentation so that we can make it through all of the material. I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Chris Liley, who is the Principal Consultant, and Kaylin Kelly, who is a Senior Consultant here at Socius. Chris and Kaylin are both located in our Atlanta office and are responsible for project management, configuration, application, and workflow design in GP. So at this point, Chris and Kaylin, we're ready to get the presentation started today.
All right, welcome everybody. Well, I'm Kaylin, and Chris is over here as well, and he's going to lead us off and give you a little bit of an overview about what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll get into a little bit deeper information.
Thanks, Kaylin. So what I wanted to start with today is just to go through what the agenda is that we're going to cover. Obviously, you just got the introduction from Cheryl, so thank you. The next thing we're going to cover is going to be our reporting trends. So we'll kind of go through kind of where the trends have been in the past couple of years as far as reporting goes, and kind of where we kind of see some of those trends moving in the years forward. Then we'll go into what our typical decision factors are when we are thinking about trying to decide on the best reporting tool for our given situation. Then we'll go into detail in a couple of the different reporting options that are available to you. Many of you who either work with the product or are familiar with GP or AX or really any of the ERP systems know that there are quite a few reporting options out there, and sometimes it's really hard to decide which one is really the one I need for the particular report I'm trying to get, or that management is asking me for, or that my executives need to or are interested in seeing. And then finally, we have a couple compare and contrast that we've kind of put together to just kind of give you a quick example of a scenario, and then the different types of reports that could get you the information, just to kind of illustrate how here's some examples of reports that can answer the same question. And hopefully throughout this webinar today, you'll be able to then see some of those decision factors that will help guide you to which of those potential tools might be the best one for that situation. And then, like Cheryl said, we will open it up to questions at the end. So first up is our trends in reporting. So when we think about the trends, the major trends that you kind of have seen in the last couple of years is really this whole idea of self-service reporting, where the goal is to kind of have your end users be able to take on a lot more of that reporting themselves. We do have a development standpoint, so from a developer standpoint, we don't necessarily always need to go or employ a very detailed and high-level developer to write a lot of reports. There's a lot of these tools that we're going to show you today end users can use to create reports, and that's kind of the whole idea of self-service reporting. Is now as an accounting admin or something like that, if an executive asks me for a report, I can really generate that report for them. I don't have to go to a developer and have them run it. Or I can also build a report if somebody comes to me with a new request. I don't need to go to my development team or an external vendor to get a report built. I now can take on some of that and build that in-house and build it myself with some of the ease of these tools. And then the other major trend is reporting through all levels of the organization. So when we think about reporting, we don't want it to just be, financial reports or somebody down at the lower levels running like an aging report. We really want the reporting to reach through all levels of the organization, whether it's an executive level that needs a dashboard of kind of the overall picture and health of a company, or do we have somebody that's in your AR department that needs to be able to run an aging and kind of keep control over what customers owe us money? So the next topic really is, where do you begin? So once I know I need to write a report or somebody has requested one, obviously my first question should be, well, where do I go? Which tool do I use to write this report? Because of all the options out there available to me. So there's kind of the three main topics here that you want to think about. One is we want to determine what our report decision factors are. And we'll go into detail on these in a minute. Then I also have to have knowledge of the options available to me. So not only do I need to know that Management Reporter, Smart List, et cetera, is available, I need to have knowledge of those tools to help me decide what is going to be the right tool to use in this report. And then thirdly, we need to understand the strengths and the benefits of each option. So again, within each of these tools, each are going to have their own strengths and benefits. Some could have some weaknesses for a particular type of report. So with us having those understandings, it should help us make a more informed decision on which tool is going to be the best one. So let's dive into the decision factors a little bit more. We've got that broken out into what we consider the 8 major decision factors when writing a report. So our first one is audience. And when you think about audience, what you want to think about is who is going to be viewing that report or consuming it, and then who is currently requesting that report. So if it's an executive, they like to see the big flashy dashboards, very concise information. They don't need a lot of detail. So I would want to try to find a tool that would kind of suit them, knowing they're going to be the consumers of this report. Whereas somebody down in the accounting department might need more detailed reports, might be an Excel dump of data. Data sources is going to be the next one. So that's going to be where my data is currently located, whether it's in SQL, whether it's in some other data source, whether it's in a data mart, a data warehouse. So I got to know where that data is coming from. Next is going to be the layout. And that's going to be, I got to think about what type of appearance do I want. Is it an ad hoc report? Is it going to be formatted to where I need to have border lines, things like that? Next is going to be latency. How often do I need this data refreshed? So a lot of times, reporting again throughout the organization, people always are going to say, I need that data immediately. Well, do they really? A lot of times people think they need reports, refresh real-time data when they really don't. I mean, if I know that data right now, is it really something I can take actionable, take action on at that point in time? So we want to think about that, because it might not be that we really need that data real time. Maybe it can be a day old. So that's something we have to consider when we're building these. Next is going to be interaction. So will our users need to drill down? Do we need to have the ability to export that data? Do we want to have the users or the generators of this report be able to filter it in any way, or is it really just a snapshot of the data? So is there any type of interaction? Next is going to be security. So will our consumers need to have, when they have access to that report, are they internal? Do we have to have external resources connect? Maybe we have some type of a sales dashboard that customers can come into a portal and view kind of their aging. Well, that's an external source that's going to have to be able to authenticate and view that data. Are we providing this data out to a bank? So things like that as far as security. Infrastructure is the next one. So that we need to think about, are we going to have, do we already own the tool? Or do we need to add something like a SSRS server or something like that? Is our current system already set up to use the tool? And then lastly would be proficiency. So can this report be easily built, or is there an internal resource that can do that for us? Okay, so now for each of these kind of decision factors, we kind of delve in and you kind of have some examples of all that. I kind of gave you most of that in the description. So for audience here, you'll see again financial, operational, executive, some external source for these reports is our audience. For our data sources, you'll see there's quite a few different data sources here. SQL tables within GP, outside of GP. So again, something like CRM or a data warehouse like I mentioned earlier, we can write reports off of Excel or text files. If there's any type of internal operational system you have that runs on a web server, we can use that as a source for data. We can have custom SQL tables or views in our environment that are maybe pulling together data from not only our GP or AX or any other ERP system, but with maybe some other ERP systems or CRM systems, so we can kind of join all that together and then present that in a report from basically one data, so pulling multiple data sources into one data source. Further defining our latency, so we kind of broken that down into really 3 levels of time frame. So one would be real time, and again, that's the one that most report requesters are going to say they need it right away, immediately. No latency on that. It's an immediate, I generate their report, I get results immediately, and they're up-to-date results. Next would be near time. So that would be something that is going to be refreshed on some type of regular interval. It could be every 30 minutes, it could be every couple hours, but that's going to not be immediate, but it is still going to be pretty close to real-time data because you are still getting it refreshed on a pretty frequent interval. And then the final option would be what we call sometime. So normally that's going to be a set interval. Typically that would be something like a nightly report for any of you that use the analysis cubes for Excel, which are we will show later in the presentation. That is something that typically will get refreshed on a nightly basis. So again, it's important when you think about that data, you'll always usually be a day behind, because now you're not, if you post something during the day and your report isn't going to be generated or refreshed until that evening, then your data throughout the day isn't really going to change if you generate a report. So the next is the layout. So again, this is going to be specific things on the layout of my report. Obviously the first one, since it's one of our basic tools that a lot of people forget about, is data within GP. So standard GP inquiry windows, that's a layout. Do we need to have some type of formatting? It may be that we're needing to put lines and boxes and shading on our report. Do we need to have subtotals on our report? So we pull in detail, or we pull in subtotals by customer, by region, whatever we may be grouping or subtotaling on. Do we need to have visuals on our report? And the 2 examples we have there, which are your most common, are going to be your charts and your graphs. Obviously, when we get into some of these tools, you'll see some other visualizations that are available, but these are going to be the ones that are most familiar to everybody because it's something you typically see when people do reports in Excel and put charts on them. And then the last area as far as layout would be like just a grid of data. And for many of you that probably use SmartList, you know what a grid of data looks like. If you use Excel, for the most part, you know what a grid of data looks like. So if that's what we're looking for, then we just need to consider that as one of our decision factors as far as layout goes. The next one we talked about was interaction. So aside from some of the things I mentioned earlier in the introduction slide, here's some other areas of interaction. So does the user of the report need to be able to drill through into maybe some underlying detail? Does that user need to be able to filter the data? Do they need to be able to refresh the data? So one big thing is, an executive usually is getting a snapshot. It may be a dashboard that's a snapshot that somebody generated for them, that they don't really need to refresh, because maybe it's just on kind of that nightly refresh, and the next day when they get the report, it's not going to get refreshed again. But we need to think about that as far as an interaction standpoint. Does the user or generator of the report need to be able to have the capability to refresh that data set? And then again, charts and graph creation. So that kind of goes hand in hand with layout a little bit, but when I'm doing interacting with the report, do I myself as the generator need to be able to create charts and graphs that I can then interact with on the report? The next topic was security. So you'll see kind of here are three kind of security mechanisms as far as our report generation. One obviously is GP security. So if I'm using any of those tools that are within GP, something like SmartList, inquiry windows, Word templates, things like that that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, you would be using GP security. Then we have some tools that would be using Windows authentication. So think about something like SSRS, the SQL reporting services, the analysis cubes for Excel. Some tools like that are going to use your Windows login that you log into your network or your computer with. And then the third one is what we're going to call outside licensing. And the easiest example of that one is going to be for kind of the new kid on the block, the Power BI. That is, you have a Office 365 license, so it's kind of not really tied to your GP or your Windows authentication. You now have another license to utilize that tool. The next decision factor is our infrastructure. So again, I mentioned inside of GP earlier, reporting servers. So in my current infrastructure, do I already have a reporting server available to me that I can utilize, or is it something during a project or in the initial phases of the project, do we need to think about putting a server in place to really host our reporting infrastructure? Something like analysis cubes, it does require analysis services, so we have to think about that. If we're going to use that as our tool, is it installed? Is it working properly? All these things we have to think about as far as the infrastructure. ODBC, which is just an open database connection. Web services, so if we have anything that's relying on web services, are those in place in our environment? Do we need to get that installed? So those are just some infrastructure areas we need to think about as far as our infrastructure. And then proficiency. So when we talk about proficiency as a decision factor, we have to think about how the skill level of the people that are going to be generating or developing our reports. So we kind of have that broken out as well. So we have our end user. So your standard AP clerk will be considered an end user. Then we have power users. So those are going to be more of your admin type people, maybe your controller level, things like that. If you have a separate IT department, that they're not really developers, but they're more power users of some of these tools. And then we also have the actual developers. So these people would have a very good understanding of table structures, how data is stored and extracted from these different systems. And then they would be the ones that would write some of those more difficult reports potentially. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Kaylin, and she's actually going to go through each of the reporting tools that we're going to cover today.
All right, thanks, Chris. So we have a variety of tools that we've identified as the most common used tools for Dynamics GP, but really any kind of data that we're going to be dealing with here. These can apply as well to some of our other Microsoft Dynamics tools. They're not specific to GP, but they definitely work really well with GP. So the first thing we're going to look at is just the product itself, so native GP, the things that are actually inside of it. And that includes SmartList as well. So SmartList is part of the GP package. We also have our Excel report builder. which is a similar kind of grid format report. Management Reporter, which is the standard financial reporting tool that comes with GP. This is going to be the replaced tool for FRX. If anybody used FRX in the past, Management Reporter is the tool you would use now. Analysis Cubes for Excel. If anybody is familiar with that one, it is one I'm very well versed in. I've spent a lot of time in Analysis Cubes for Excel. It has you can tell by the name, Excel is its way that you access the data. SQL Server Reporting Services, this is kind of our jack of all trades guy. As long as you know how to use SQL Server Reporting Services, you can build a variety of reports. And these are also stored in the Business Analyzer, so that's a little bit quicker of a way to get to your stored reports. And then, like Chris said, we have our new kid on the block, Power BI, which has dashboard capabilities, and it has its own platform that Microsoft is pushing very heavily right now. So there's a lot of their development team working on that and making that better, adding improvements constantly. So throughout the rest of this presentation, you're going to see this green grid structure. And this is organized so that each of your 8 decision factors will have an answer for every tool. So each tool is going to have its own slide, and then our grid is going to be filled out for each of the decision factors. And this will kind of help you head toward the right direction of making the correct decision for your report. It'll show you the strengths or the weaknesses of each item. So for native GP, there's something that we think a lot of people overlook that can solve your question pretty easily. It's very straightforward. If you have access to GP, you can immediately get this result. So the audience is going to be somebody that already has a GP license, already knows how to log into the product, and it's already built within GP, so the layout is a GP window. There's not much you can do there. You either look at the window or you don't. You can't do a lot of customization to that unless you know a lot of the back-end structure. There are some drillable links that people we've found have overlooked as well. So if you're in one window, there are some drillable links to go back to other windows. And just like I mentioned, the security and infrastructure is all inside of GP. So just to show in our screenshots, here's a good example of a question you might have. How's this customer doing? So I can see immediately from my customer payment summary inquiry window within GP that I have my aging buckets and how much is due from this customer. I can take a quick look at their credit limit, any discounts they have on them, when their last invoice was sent, when their payment was received, and if I sent them a statement. This is a screenshot from Fabricam, so you might notice these dates are a little crazy looking. So this window gives you a quick snapshot, and this is probably an inquiry window that you've never opened before because there's a lot of inquiry windows inside of GP, and they don't always get opened. So here I have a blue underline link. If I highlight a particular aging period, I can click on that amount button, and that will open an additional window that will show me the detail behind that value in the aging bucket. And from here, I'd be able to look at that amount remaining and see how much has been applied to that amount. So I can see that there was a credit as well as 2 payments. And then I still have an open value on that invoice. So inside of GP, I didn't have to write a custom report. I didn't have to contact anybody. I just opened GP, went straight to an inquiry window. So don't forget about those inquiry windows. The next item is to talk about are the reports within GP. Some of you are familiar with this. So these are standard GP tables. The security is also going to be GP. You don't have to install anything separate. The infrastructure is all just baked into GP. This would be for an end user. One of the benefits of this tool is your latency. It's real time. really, really real time because it's in GP. So anytime a table gets updated with a new transaction, these GP reports are going to instantly pull that information. There's no lag, there's no copying the data somewhere. They're going to be really real-time latency. So for example, this is what one of those reports looks like. It's not the prettiest report. It's kind of got a DOS-looking layout to it. You can print it to a printer. It kind of struggles a little bit in doing anything other than that, but I can print it to the screen and I can print it to a physical printer. It's laid out so that I can, based on its report structure, this particular one is my historical age trial balance, and I can see my invoices, any payments against them, and I got a nice subtotal. So this is nice because it's already done. It's completed. This report exists. All you have to do is log into GP and run it. Also inside of GP are Word templates. So these are very similar to the GP reports, and the infrastructure behind that is Microsoft Word. So if you have a terminal server without Office installed, they'll be a little tricky to print because you will need access to Microsoft Word. They're a little bit more formatted, not quite so DOS looking. And this is your GP security as well. So it's still running from within GP. So an example of that would be an invoice. Maybe I wanted this invoice to have some different fields than it came out of the box with. I could go into my Word template and modify that a little bit. And that doesn't require quite a developer. It's a little bit more of a power user kind of role. So if you can make a good educated guess about what fields you want, you can test it and figure it out pretty easily. The next thing is Smart List. We have found that a majority of people that use GP have already found Smart List or have been shown Smart List. Occasionally we run into people that have never heard of it before, and that is life-changing when they start using it. So don't forget about Smart List either. I know that some of you might be rolling your eyes right now because this is very basic information. But don't forget about these things. Sometimes you can overdo it and get a good custom report built for something you could have done easily within Smart List or inquiry windows. So this again is inside GP. Security is going to be GP. There's a / Windows authentication there for my security because you can use Report Builder, which is on the outside of GP. So our Smart List Designer and Builder, depending on what version of GP you're on, the newer versions of GP, it's called Designer because it is now Microsoft owned. If you're on an earlier version of GP, it would be a third-party product called Smart List Builder. And the visual impact of this report, the layout is going to be a grid of data. So this report's not going to be great if you want a subtotal, and it's going to be primarily exporting to Excel is the main purpose of Smart List. This is a screenshot of Smart List Designer. So this is new to GP 2015 and up. And this is owned by Microsoft now, so it's part of GP. And you're able to pull from any of the tables that exist inside GP. So comparative to the old Smart List, you got a standard list of Smart Lists that they built based on what they think you'd want. So now with Smart List Designer, you can pull up any of the other tables inside GP and pull in any additional information you need. You need to kind of know what you're doing a little bit here because you can do a table join. So if you incorrectly join a table, your data might not be perfect. So I definitely encourage you to do some testing and data validation on any new Smart List Designer reports you might make. Management Reporter is primarily financial based. So our audience here is financials and executives. The sales team's not going to care too much about your Management Reporter reports because they're going to be mostly balance sheets, profit and loss statements, cash flows. And so this is a product that is going to work very well with GP. It is a replacement of FRX if you used FRX in the past. And it is going to give you a lot of formatting options here. So you can add underlines, you can bold things, you can color some rows and columns if you need to. So these can look very pretty if you need to create a financial statement package to give to your board. You can build these in Management Reporter once and have them saved and then just generate each month. So you can have somebody that just opens the program and clicks generate. You will need GP security to be able to access the GP database to run the data. And the Windows authentication, you will need to be set up to access the actual application, Management Reporter. So those two things you will have to add that user access. Infrastructure, we have reporting server mentioned here. That is kind of a recommendation. It's not required. It can speed up your reports and it can make sure that your regular GP server doesn't slow down while you're generating your month's financials. So reporting server is encouraged if you have the space and the money and the infrastructure available to have a separate reporting server. It can speed some things up. This Management Reporter has about a 7-minute latency. That's why we have it listed under real-time and sometime. So it's mostly real-time as long as you have 7 minutes worth of patience before you post your journal in GP and then want to go look at it in your financial statement. So here's a screenshot of what Management Reporter looks like. Tried to get a screenshot where you can see some of the additional formatting that can be done. You can add some colors, some boxes and bolding. You can add a logo if you wanted to add your company's logo. And you can add some some underlines if you wanted to make it very clean looking. Our next tool is Analysis Cubes for Excel. The audience here is going to be internal, so you will need your Windows authentication security to connect to your database. It is only Windows authentication security, so that's nice for people that are not GP users. So your sales team, your operations, if they don't have access into the GP database because they don't need to be doing anything inside GP, they can still have their Windows authentication account set up to access the cubes, and they'd be able to see the data coming out of GP. The data source here is going to be a data warehouse, which means that your infrastructure also includes analysis services. So you need to have a couple things configured before you can install Analysis Cubes for Excel. The price of the software actually comes with GP, but we recommend having someone help you install it. Associates, of course, would be the preferred person to help you with that. We have found a couple things along the way that we do better than Microsoft did in the original package. So there's a couple bug fixes we have that we can apply that make a really big difference as opposed to just doing the out-of-the-box install. The latency here is going to be some time because it does refresh once a night. You can enable this to run on demand if you need to. We have a couple of clients that have a push button available to them if they need to, for example, at month-end close, run the job more frequently. Maybe they want to run it at lunch so they can check the bookings they made that morning before they review them that afternoon instead of waiting until the next day. The layout here is going to be as much layout as you want. This is going to be in Excel. You have all standard Excel functionality. You can do, it's based in a pivot table. You can add visuals. It's instinctively going to have subtotals. You can format it to your heart's content. You also have the ability to easily filter, to refresh your own report, do a filter, add a chart or a graph. So there's a lot of functionality there. And so here's a screenshot example of what you can create with that. You can make a dashboard in Excel that has a couple charts and graphs that you want to give to someone, and you can tell them, refresh this, the data will come in refresh in the morning, and then it will stay there until the end of the day, and then the next day it'll have additional data. And this tool is really great because it's in Excel, and a lot of people already know Excel, so it's right in their comfort zone. SQL Server Reporting Services is a great workhorse for a lot of different reports. You'll see that there's a lot more of the word all on this tab. So we have all of our audience. Latency can be whatever you want. You can have reports that generate when you push a button, or you can have a report that generates on a schedule. There's a lot of different layouts you can do here. You can produce a report that has a grid. You can add subtotals. You can add charts and graphs. You can add a lot of different types of layout here. The data sources also has a lot of options. So you can connect to a variety of locations, straight to your GP tables, to different SQL databases, to a warehouse. You can even connect it to an ODBC connection if you need to create a different kind of data structure. Your security is going to be mixed. It kind of depends on where your data is sitting to decide what security you need to apply. So if you're on your reporting server, sometimes you can get away with just using your Windows authentication if you just need somebody to access a report that's currently sitting out there. You will need to have reporting services installed. It's kind of in the name, so it's required. And then the proficiency here, we recommend a power user or higher. So this is going to require a little bit more knowledge of the product. You will need to know how reporting services work. You'll need to know how to write a SQL query, most likely, unless you have a report that's already built and you just need to modify it. So an example of what a reporting services report might look like, this is a purchase order history report. So this is one particular PO and the items on that PO. And then there's some subtotals down at the bottom. You can see that it's formatted in a way that the subtotals are on the right side so that you can move those to the left if you prefer it over there in the report designer. You can also export SQL Server reporting services to a variety of export formats, which include Excel, Word, comma delimited file, PDF. You got a lot of options there. The next tool we're going to look at is Power BI. Power BI is going to be a tool that you need an Office 365 account for. So keep that in mind when you are considering this product. You can't just create one report on the fly. You have to have that Windows 365 account before you can do that. And so the infrastructure would require that Power BI license. Besides that, you will need to have the Power BI suite downloaded, which gets updated regularly. They have a lot of new and exciting additions that they're rolling out into that product. There's a lot of Microsoft development going into that. It is something that they're very excited about, and they are spending a lot of time and energy on that right now. In terms of layout, this is going to be a heavily dashboard type of reporting tool. So you're going to get a lot of charts and graphs and filtering, and you have the ability to drill down, but your first stop is going to be that dashboard, big picture kind of report. The latency here is really anything. You can have real time if you are connected to a data source that allows for your data to get updated. If you connect to a GP table, it will be real time. If you connect to a warehouse, it will be some time depending on how often that warehouse gets refreshed. Proficiency here is all. It is end user friendly as long as you know how to use the tool. So if you've opened it before and wanted to play around in it, you can adjust a report that already exists, or you can drag and drop some of the features to create your own report. There also is a power user and developer side to that, because some of the queries that you might want to write for your Power BI reports might be a little more complicated and might require someone with more knowledge. So here is a visual representation of a Power BI dashboard. You can see that our Associates logo is on that. It's actually one that we've created, and we have a suite of Power BI dashboards that we can sell you, of course, to give you a view into your data. So we have a couple of pre-packaged ones already built that you can just start using right away. You don't need a developer. You don't need anyone to sit down and learn the tool. You can get these already done product reports from us. And here's just a little bit better of a screenshot. Gives a little bit different view of the data. And then I'm going to quickly just go over some of the other ones. These are a little bit more complicated. These require a separate implementation. These are some bigger tools for things that might be a little more on the side of budgeting, forecasting, but they also have reporting components. So BI 360, De facto, and Adaptive Insights are all products that Associates has worked with and is a partner with all of these different companies. So BI 360, excuse me, is going to be a tool that allows you to stay in Excel and create some really cool reports. It also has some budgeting functionality. All of these have budgeting functionalities that I'm going to be talking about. De facto is very similar. All of the data is stored in a warehouse location, and then you're going to be able to submit your budget forecast information, or if you just wanted to pull up a report of actuals, you can do that as well. Adaptive Planning is a cloud-based solution. So if you want to be in the cloud, this is a good tool. If your company's requirements keep you from being in the cloud, then this tool is not going to be for you. So bringing this all together, now that we know what our challenges are and we've seen the strengths of each tool, that can help us actually make a decision. So we have an example here, a historical age trial balance, if you've ever seen it shortened, abbreviated to HATB, historical age trial balance. This is usually a lot more interesting if you guys are sitting in front of me. Since you're all on computers, I'm just going to breeze past this section. So the historical age trial balance is when customers owe me money. I want to see how much money they owe me and when they're going to be paying it to me. So instead of asking for suggestions of what tool to use, I'm just going to tell you. So one of the options that we can do is in GP. So I'm just going to hop over here to GP. So in our sales module of GP, we have some inquiry windows. So just like that one I pulled up earlier, we could look at a receivables summary and quickly see here based on one particular customer ID. We can calculate their outstanding amount and see a breakdown of all of their documents that we've recorded for them, see the aging bucket when their aging is what bucket their aging is sitting in. If it's in 91 and over, maybe we need to pay attention to them. This does require you to know exactly what customer you're looking for or exactly what class or sales territory. You need to know a specific piece of information for this report. Now a second option would be to run a historical age trial balance from within GP. I can also run that same report up on my SQL Server Reporting Services website. Now all these reports out here came with GP. Microsoft rewrote all of those old DOS-looking reports into SSRS reports. So from here, I would be able to look at my historical age trial balance report and fill in some of the data requirements here. I can sort by a customer, I can sort the documents, and I can look at a particular range of documents. If I know my customer, I can enter it here, but it's not required. So if I run it for a long set of time, so I have a print as of currently today, my start date was the beginning of time, And then I can see all of my customers listed here with all of their open documents and their balance laid out into each of the aging buckets. Now this can be exported to XML, comma delimited, PDF, Excel, Word. There's a lot of options you have here. If I wanted to look at my report in maybe more of a summarized fashion, I could do that with the analysis cubes. I'm going to show you a screenshot for the sake of time on that one. So we took a look at our SSRS solution. For our analysis cubes, we'd be able to do a pivot table and create a chart off of that pivot table. So there is that data inside of the cubes based on each customer and document. So if I wanted to look at a summary level here, just look at the big picture, how much aging is in my 181 days and over. It looks like I'm not doing a great job at collecting money right now, so I need to try a little bit harder. Similar to analysis cubes, our Power BI solution would allow kind of a big picture approach. I can see on my chart on the left that there is a group of documents that are in my 61 to 90 days, and then I can look on my right and see that my Berry Medical Center has the bulk of those transactions. So maybe I should go talk to that customer and see why they haven't been paying me. And again, for the sake of time, I think I'll go through this one a little quickly. In terms of departmental expenses, if you think about your department, if it's part of your GL string, you can slice and dice for a variety of different reports. For example, in the analysis cubes, I can just pull in my segment departmental, and I will show that in analysis cubes. So if I'm inside of Excel, I can choose an existing connection and create a pivot table, which will allow me to see all of the fields in my warehouse. So I can pull in my GL amount, and then under my account dimension, I know that my department is my account segment 1, and I can even pull in my description and see exactly what the name of that department is. And I'm going to change the design here so that I can look at them all next to each other in tabular form without any of those subtotals. So now I can see for all of time, my administration uses up the most of my money. I don't know if anybody's surprised by that. And then down here we have our purchasing and receiving. Looks like they're not spending as much money. So within a couple of seconds, I was able to pull up quickly my amounts by department. I can also put a date filter on that information if I wanted to look specifically at a particular year or month or quarter. I can see that information. And I am inside of the Fabricam database, so don't be too worried about that empty department. So from here I can add some charts, formatting, make it really pretty, and save this report as an Excel document. Next month I can open it, click refresh. I don't have to rebuild the report. It's already saved inside of Excel. I can also use SSRS to do this. I can run a query against my database based on my account segment over a period of time. Or I can even use Management Reporter based on my account segment. I can do a year-to-date balance. I can pull in a particular month, and then I can see exactly what operating expenses I'm spending and which department is using the most or isn't using their entire budgeted amount. So I ran through some of those examples pretty quickly. Hopefully everybody attended this webinar could get a little bit of information out of there, and that'll help you build your reports, help you make some better decisions, choose the tool that actually makes the most sense for the data that you're looking for. So I think at this time we'll open up to questions. So if anybody has any questions for us.
And it does look like there are a couple of questions in. Just to remind everyone, you can either submit them through the GoToWebinar question box, and I can field them to Kayla and Chris, or just click the hand button and I'll unmute your individual line here. We did want to mention a couple of things. Our next GP upcoming webinar is on July 21st, covering tips and tricks. GP User Group Summit is coming up October 11th to 14th in Tampa. You can visit gpugsummit.com for more information. And I believe the registration link is up at this point as well. We do have a few promotions running, specifically $1,000 off E1's GP integration tool called Smart Connect, and 10% off sales pads, order entry, inventory purchasing, and sales management software. So we have some more questions coming up. I'm going to go ahead and start fielding those over. Functionally, what is the difference between Smart List Designer and Smart List Builder? Are they essentially the same?
They are essentially the same. That interface that Kaylin showed is the designer one. That one's a little cleaner looking than the builder one is. For anybody who's used builder, it just works a little bit different, but they essentially do the same thing. But like I said, the user interaction is going to be a little bit cleaner and nicer in the designer than it is in the builder.
And if you did have builder reports, unfortunately they do not migrate over to the designer. So they would have to be rebuilt.
What are you recommending for a replacement for Forecaster?
Some of those last three tools that I said, Power BI 360, Adaptive Planning, and De facto, those are our highest recommendations for Forecaster replacements.
Yeah, Terry Ginley, who runs our BI department, would be happy to speak to anybody on those, because it really would come down to, you know, if you're more cloud focused, Adaptive might be a good fit, whereas the solver and the de facto are more kind of on-premise type solutions.
There's a couple of questions about this PowerPoint being available afterwards. You'll receive an automatic email from GoToWebinar afterwards, and it will include a link to the recording as well as a link to the PowerPoint presentation. So those will be available to you. Do the reporting tools work with payroll systems such as ADP or Paycor to pull in information from the system without having to download information?
Without having to download it, I don't think so. I would have to look into that a little bit. You definitely could if you could get the data down with some type of integration tool and bring it on site or in the cloud. If you're going to be using Power BI, you'd be able to get to it. I don't know if there are connectors that would work directly with ADP. We could definitely talk with them and see if they have like an API into that software that would allow you to get the data direct from there.
You have a recommendation for customer AR portal so they can see invoices, etc.?
I would do it through SSRS probably. We have to figure out, you know, what kind of security you would need in that portal, because obviously you don't want somebody being able to pull up you know, their summary or somebody else's summary rather. But there is some stuff you can do with security there with pass-through authentication, so that if a customer came in authenticated, then they're going to get presented with that specific data. But that would probably be the tool that I would use for that.
This guy's saying, I don't see a link to Excel Analyzer in my tools. Is that an additional module that needs to be purchased? If not, where do I find it in GP?
I'm going to assume that it was Business Analyzer that maybe you were looking for. So Business Analyzer is a new kind of separate install for GP. It is actually inside of the GP install media. So the same place you went to install GP, there would be a shortcut there to install the Business Analyzer. And just to kind of show you what that looks like inside of GP on my home ribbon, my home page actually, there's a little box for Business Analyzer, and so this would connect to any SSRS reports that I have out on my server, and so this can be a separate install. So if you don't have GP installed on your computer, you can install the Business Analyzer from that same GP Media folder.
It doesn't require any additional licensing. It's just an install that needs to be done.
Hopefully that answered the question.
When we upgrade from GP 2015 or 2016, do we have to switch to Smart List Designer, or can we continue using Builder?
You can continue using Builder. Like Kayla mentioned, there's no conversion right now of Smart List Builder to Designer. So you would have to continue your license with E1 for the Smart List Builder. And then if at any point you wanted to convert your things over to Smart List Designer so that down the road you could get rid of that license to Smart List Builder, you could do that. But you definitely would need to continue it if you had a lot of Smart List Builder ones already, because there is no way to convert them.
And it looks like we're running up on 2 o'clock and we're out of questions, so we're going to stay on the line a couple minutes longer in case any more do come through. Kaylin, if you could switch to the next PowerPoint slide. We have Kaylin and Chris's direct contact information here if you do want to email them afterwards if you have any additional questions, or you can always contact your account manager. But we want to thank you for attending today and taking time out of your schedule. And you're welcome to stay on if you have additional questions, but if not, thanks for your time today.